Good evening. Before we begin, I just wanted to ask if there's anybody here who needs the services of our sign language interpreter. Okay, back there. Okay, great. Well, good evening. My name is Laura Bailey and I work at the Department of Education here at MoMA, and I'd like to welcome you to the last session of our fall 2006 series of Conversations with Contemporary Artists, which is made possible by the endowment established by the Junior Associates of the Museum of Modern Art. This series, which began in 1993, hosted 3 contemporary artists this fall: Yuri Masny, Barry Whitmill of Free Play Energy, and tonight, Trisha Donnelly. If you're not able to attend our previous programs or you'd like to hear this once again, I'd like to draw your attention to moma.org/audio, where you can find recordings available for download for all our recent Think Modern programs. This evening I have the pleasure of introducing you to Trisha Donnelly. Trisha was born in San Francisco and received a BFA from UCLA and an MFA from the Yale University of Art. She is a recipient of the 2004 Central Kunstpreis from Cologne, Germany. Her work, ranging from photographs, drawings, videos, sound and performance art, has been exhibited internationally, from Frankfurt to Bologna to Miami and New York. She was featured in the Berlin and Whitney Biennials of 2006, the Moscow Biennial of 2005, the Dakar Biennial and the Carnegie International of 2004, and the 2003 Venice Biennale, among many others. Trisha will present her work and take questions from the audience. So please join me in welcoming Trisha Donnelly. Good evening. Tonight, since it's such a specific room, I think that instead of how I would normally show you as work, I'm going to give you a description of the 11th Prismatic in a series. And so, just listen. Do you need me to speak up and bear with me? This is reading, and I don't typically read aloud. So, but it's important because this information needs to register. So bear with my librarian reading skills. A different time I found in folded space, one not dictated by other Platonic. I was within the assumption that the object, namely the objects of art, when looked at for long enough, could be cracked, pixelated in links and shattered. This, imagine, was a reaction of the amount of space the sculptural object actually took up. The ability to travel around something weakens the thing, the defenses and stability. The cable stress dissection in a fast series of clicks, ecstatic inner speed, the mind hoops from connection to reference to memory to imagined memory, the future. It's like a crack of current originating from all different directions when this object is taken apart. But it was one day in a photograph that I suppose the shock. A photograph that I was looking at for, I suppose, as longer than a millisecond you should, then my brain understood as the average viewing time for something is empty. The image cracked, split into a stutter form and time. You know that sound of a stutter where the object is a stutter that your mind makes? It split, and an 11-sided prism fulged into formation. A stutter of multiple images connected to the original crack, not images that were referential in any way, not a reminder type, not like a family of sites, but exactly like a family, in its discomfort with their inevitable connection. This prism was an object, a stutter, a pulsing diagram. This was not a mystical experience. Do not make that mistake of interpretation due to my limited ability to describe the phenomenon. Instead, understand it as a truly metronome space, a matter, physical suggestion, and undirected by myself. It was like a brain sighed cough or dialed the phone. So perhaps this is best described in radio. A different time is found in faulted space, one not dictated by the other Platonic. A man's footsteps emerge from what sounds like a narrow corridor. A door squeaks open, a chime is the only beginning for the show. Pahl, who turns out to be female, or at least have the voice of one, begins in answer to the announcer introductory statement, which is, and the ultimate folded space is perhaps the photograph. I was within the assumption that the object, namely the object of art, when looked at for long enough, could be cracked, pixelated in links and shattered. I had always assumed that this was a reaction to the amount of space the sculptural object actually took up. The ability to travel around something weakens that thing, defense, stability. The cable stress dissection is a fast series of clicks, ecstatic in its speed. One's mind hops from connection to the reference, to memory, to imagined memory, the future. It is like a crash of incurrents originating from different directions when this object is taken apart. Pahl holds up the photograph to the microphone. This action is only seen by those within the studio. Let's say this lecture is a broadcast. Let's see where that puts us. I put this in reverse. These are operators. I could say these photographs are available, but their purpose at this point is instead invocation of the photographer. The action returns to the scene. This man James is dead. These photographs are no one and total. If he was here and she was there and the camera would look through and back onto, these are the operations. Reverberation. The second description of the 11th prismatic starts in reverberation. Listen carefully. When the first sound meets itself, it takes a moment to get over the usual polite recognition. When the collision finally occurs. The sound greets itself and reacts with the need for distance. It first becomes a boomerang-type sound, a hovering circular flight pattern made up of the stutter of the sound of the ultimate voice, back and forth between the originals, stimulating sound and its reflection. Eventually, the distancing of these two is so great, it's such a long straight arm, that they go multiple and become one sound, made up first two, then exponential parts. It is one point, all places one point in all places. Do you hear? This sound, the sound to the ear, is deceptive. The space of the sound is vast. I'm not sure what this means, but I'm sure that this is the sound. This is the sound of distance, this sound of natural space between things. And if it is between things and themselves or their own stutter, that distance is vast. In the 11th, there is compressed distance, filled distance. We take a break now for an explanation of inversion. Inversion, which at one point I guess was used to describe homosexuality, which is the perfect confusion, is the tear of double difference. The inversion is the call-in response, the double same, the double resurrector. I am wrong perhaps a better description rather than reverb that meets itself in the failings of the Spartan hoplites. The mass meets itself, it is a plasma of men. The failings was a unit, a mass of the multiple. Individuality, or the claim of it, was considered a disgrace. The success of the hoplites' battle style demanded on tightness and unifying force of the failings, both emotionally and physically, from the Peloponnesian wars of the Battle of Tyre and the warrior authorities. He roves up from the corpses to erect a monument to the slain. Upon the completion of the monument, he is set up to return to the exact place among the dead, laying in one mass of the failings, and commit suicide as an ultimate display of honour. The failing unbroken, but in the construction of the monument, he became a point, a laser out, and then drawn back into the mass. This is like the photograph. After erecting a monument to the slain, the monument is the image, the flat is the photo, the failings is the mass. Where point arrives to and departs and returns to, number 3 is the puff. The third description of the 11th prismatic, the mirror is a lens with a back a double camera, the photographer and the photograph collected in one, eliminating the physical output of a reproduction, but causing internal output to infinite of interior reproducible. This is when the sound meets itself, the view meets itself with no recognition. Demands space. The space that the bounce manifests itself in comes in the shape of the spiral or a prism cracking at every change and yet maintaining its fusion through light. There are different types of animals. Some learn vanity, but others, when visions come through, though with many animals it's an impossibility, and shows an animal a mirror, the looker will puff, thinking it is another. A true and natural occurrence that humans have somehow accustomed themselves to. Perhaps we've learnt recognition, but the unconscious shock of the human view in the mirror when one's face is not there is owned daily. The double D resurrector. We undergo a psychic shock each day when we look in the mirror. We see the radio that the voice is emitted from. Most of the time we are in the studio, making corridors with the detached doors wrapped up in on-air broadcasts. But radios are smaller when that comes out of them, hence your daily shock. The envelope is too small. The envelope is too small. Roman death call sometimes inscribed this phrase over their time, non omnis moria, or shall I not be entirely dead? Number 4 is a Fisher. Let's say Greta Garbo. What not, who was feedback? What you see in the photo is the resurrection, the bounce, the push-off, the long arm. Photographically, Garbo equals original prayer, one of the most photographed, most erupted images of culture at the time. Garbo woke up to a million Garbos, no mirror necessary. In a book of photos, when close, the photo's view is of each other. Right up again, and the more she withdrew from her own reflection, the greater the triumph of her capture. And a woman of modern gender, physically, practically butch. I'm not interested in analysing Garbo herself, instead Garbo the photograph, as in the landscape of the photograph, the Garbo photograph. Queen Christina makes her way around every inch of the room, demanding that this is the placement into memory, the physical feel-up. Perhaps her success within this particular scene is due what to, is due what is due, is due, is due, is due, to what she was busy doing in the shifting multiple dimensions. Being the image, one can shift it oneself. As the image bounces it off the additional quantities the image delivers. In the image is the image that imitates the image. Use the image is in the image, the circular boomerang. Garbo's first computer, on screen, taking in the roof of Queen Christina, suspicious if one could be flattened and literally in between the pages of a printed text. If one can be printed and one is a dimension, I repeat, one is a dimension, Garbo in multitude, Garbo. Garbo separate who from what? Garbo separate who from what? Garbo the star from Garbo, the star from the photograph from flat, the photograph is flat. Paper is flat, but liquid all the same. G period is the name on the door, G period is the name by the phone on the door. Of Garbo G, just G on Garbo. One could blame her body's repulsion from the lens of vanity. Fear of aging, the generally simplified and often sexist assumption, the public lens on a public figure. Instead, separating the who from the what. Garbo is the photograph, knowing this when Garbo's photograph saw Garbo's photograph, a recursive occurrence. A stutter, a miniature cataclysm, the push of the lens. The arms up facing straps, the defense against the photograph was the reverb. Feedback, the 11th. It caused the 11th, it is the 11th. The sound that meets itself demands space, and then forgets, changes its mind, reverses, clashes itself into light. This is the 11th prismatic. And that concludes our broadcast for this evening. I'll leave you with a little bit of troubleless mind. Trouble in mind.
be blue always, 'cause the sun's gonna shine my back door someday. I'm gonna lay on my head on some lonesome railroad line. Let the 219 train ease my troubled mind.
So I guess this is a call-in portion. Does anyone have any questions? I changed my mind. I have no questions. That's it for the broadcast. Thank you very much.